بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أصحاب السمو والمعالي والسعادة، ضيوف المنتدى والسيدات والسادة، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بداية أتقدم بالشكر والتقدير للهيئة العامة للاستثمار على تنظيم هذا المنتدى الهام ولدعوتي للمشاركة. كما تعلمون فقد استهدفت المملكة العربية السعودية بقيادة خادم الحرمين الشريفين الملك عبد الله بن عبد العزيز عبر عدد من المبادرات تنويع اقتصادياتها مع التركيز على العنصر البشري والمهارات ذات القيمة المضافة كمحركات رئيسية في التطوير والنمو. وضمن أهم تلك المبادرات ما تقوم عليه وزارة الاقتصاد والتخطيط بمشاركة جهات عديدة امتدادا للعمل الكبير الذي قامت به مجموعة الأغر لوضع استراتيجية وطنية للتحول إلى مجتمع المعرفة، التي تسعى لأن تصبح المملكة مجتمعا معرفيا في ظل اقتصاد قائم على المعرفة مزدهر متنوع المصادر والإمكانيات تقوده القدرات البشرية المنتجة والقطاع الخاص. ومن ضمن الأهداف الوصول ذلك هو توفير قدرات بشرية متطورة من خلال بناء نظام على مستوى عالمي لتنمية الموارد البشرية يتمتع بدرجة عالية من التنوع والديناميكية والابتكار والتطوير الذاتي، يكون قادراً على رعاية موهوبيه وتمكينه من إنتاج قوى عاملة عالية الكفاءة. السيدات والسادة، يتوفر لدى المملكة العربية السعودية المكونات التي تتيح لها التحول لمجتمع المعرفة، والمتمثلة في الإرادة السياسية والبيئة الداعمة لقطاع الأعمال والاستثمارات الحكومية الكبيرة والبنية التحتية التقنية المتينة، وفوق ذلك البعد السكاني المميز. فكما تعلمون فإن بلادي تعد دولة شابة يمثل من هم أقل من 25 سنة في العمر ما يعادل 50% من السكان. فالموهبة والابتكار لدى الشباب يمثلون الذخائر الفريدة لبناء مجتمع معرفي راسخ ومنافس. وفي هذا الصدد تولي حكومة المملكة العربية السعودية أولوية لقطاع التعليم بشكل عام وللتعليم العام بشكل خاص. ففي هذا العام كانت ميزانية التعليم العام 121 مليار ريال، بما نسبتها 14% تقريبا من الميزانية العامة للدولة. يضاف لذلك الدعم المستقل لمشروع الملك عبد الله بن عبد العزيز لتطوير التعليم العام بمبلغ 9 مليارات ريال. الحضور الكرام، إن تطوير جودة التعليم يعد المكون الرئيس في استراتيجية التحول إلى مجتمع المعرفة. ف5 ملايين طالب في النظام التعليمي حالياً يمثلون الكفاءات العاملة مستقبلاً في مجتمع المعرفة، فمنهم مهندسون ومصممون ومتخصصون في التقنيات الحيوية وباحثون ورواد في القطاع الخاص وقياديون وإداريون في المؤسسات وغير ذلك. ولذلك فطورت وزارة التربية والتعليم من خلال مشروع الملك عبد الله لتطوير التعليم العام رؤية للطالب ليكون مواطناً متمسكاً بدينه وقيمه وأخلاقه، مستمتعاً بتعليمه، منجزاً علمياً، منتجاً للمعرفة، متعلماً مدى الحياة، إيجابياً في التعامل مع المجتمع والعالم، سليم الفكر، متكامل الشخصية. وتم بالشراكة مع بيت خبرة عالمي بناء استراتيجية وطنية لتحقيق هذه الرؤية. وقد تضمنت الاستراتيجية عدد من المبادرات النوعية التي تعالج عدة مستويات من الابتكار الممنهج، تدور حول العناصر الرئيسية المتمثلة في المنهج والبيئة التعليمية المادية والتقنية والنشاط المدرسي وتطوير المعلم. وعقدنا الشراكات الدولية لتنفيذ هذه الاستراتيجية. الحضور الكريم، إن التركيز على المهارات النوعية هو السبيل للتحول نحو مجتمع المعرفة والوصول للمنافسة العالمية، فلم يعد الوصول للمعرفة واكتسابها كافياً في مجتمع المعرفة. فالمناسبة تتطلب إتقان مهارات متنوعة لابد أن تمتلكها الأجيال. فمن ضمن ذلك إعداد المتعلمين للقرن 21 من خلال اكتسابهم مهارات التفكير الناقد والإبداعي وحل المشكلات والقيادة والمشاركة ومهارات التواصل مع الآخرين والمواطنة العالمية والفضول العلمي. أما على المستوى التخصصي فقد تبنينا مواد تعليمية بمعايير دولية في تخصصات العلوم والرياضيات والحاسب الآلي واللغة الإنجليزية بشراكات متنوعة مع بيوت خبرة عالمية. كل ذلك جزء من مبادرة أوسع في العلوم والتقنية والهندسة والرياضيات، ونحن على ثقة أن ذلك سيسهم في اكتساب طلابنا للمهارات المطلوبة لتنويع اقتصادنا. كما تم إعداد برنامج متخصص للإعداد للوظيفة والريادة لتمكين المتعلمين من اكتساب العادات والمهارات المطلوبة في قطاع الأعمال وتمتين كفاءتهم الريادية. السيدات والسادة، بناء طلاب مبدعين يتطلب معلمين وقياديين تربويين مبدعين كذلك، ولذلك فنستثمر في برنامج التطوير المهني إضافة إلى سعينا إلى تمهيد التعليم من خلال ما يلي: رفع سقف معايير الدخول للوظائف التعليمية، تقديم برامج متخصصة للمعلمين الجدد، إعداد مسارات مهنية ورتب للمعلمين لتحفيز الأداء العالي، إصدار رخص المعلمين، تطوير نظام متين لتقويم المعلمين، تنويع فرص التطوير المهني لدعم التعلم المستمر، تشجيع مجتمعات التعلم المهنية، وأخيراً تقدير الأداء المتميز من خلال الجوائز الوطنية. الحضور الكرام، نظامنا التعليمي يستوعب أهمية الاكتشاف المبكر وتقديم الرعاية والتطوير للعقول المبدعة، وضمن تحفيز الابتكار والإبداع ورعاية الموهبة، فقد أسس خادم الحرمين الشريفين الملك عبد الله بن عبد العزيز مؤسسة الملك عبد العزيز ورجاله لرعاية الموهبة والإبداع، مؤسسة موهبة لغرض اكتشاف الموهوبين ورعايتهم، وقد طورت مقاييس وطنية لاكتشاف الموهوبين والموهوبات، وقد وصل عدد المتقدمين لهذه المقاييس خلال هذا العام ما يقارب 60,000 طالب وطالبة، ويتم بعد ذلك رعايتهم من خلال برامج داخلية وخارجية مع بيوت خبرة وطنية وعالمية، كما يشاركون في الأولمبياديات العالمية في تخصصات العلوم والهندسة والرياضيات. وقد بلغ ما حققه طلابنا وطالباتنا خلال السنتين الأخيرتين فقط أكثر من 40 ميدالية إقليمية ودولية تمثل مراكز متقدمة. كما تقدم مركز طلاب المملكة عام 2013 في الأولمبياد الدولي للرياضيات إلى المركز 42 من بين 99 دولة، ونطمح بإذن الله أن نكون ضمن أفضل 10 دول خلال السنوات القادمة. السيدات والسادة، لا يتوقف تحفيز الإبداع والابتكار على تطوير المنهج وأساليب التدريس والتقويم والتقنيات التعليمية والتطوير المهني أو برامج متخصصة للمبدعين والموهوبين، بل لابد أن يتزامن معه التطوير التنظيمي الذي يستهدف تعلم الطلاب، ويحتل ذلك مكاناً أساسياً في استراتيجية تطوير التعليم. ولذلك يتم حالياً إعادة هيكلة رغبة في دعم وتشجيع الابتكار عبر عدة مستويات في النظام التعليمي. واسمحوا لي أن أشارككم بعض الإجراءات في هذا المجال. 1. إنشاء شركة حكومية باسم تطوير القابضة لدعم وزارة التربية والتعليم لتقديم الخدمات الأساسية والثانوية، وحتى الآن تم إنشاء 3 شركات تابعة لهذه الشركة الرئيسة، وهي شركة تطوير الخدمات التعليمية، شركة تطوير خدمات النقل التعليمي، شركة تطوير المباني. وتمثل الشركات الذراع التنفيذي وبيت الخبرة والابتكار لوزارة التربية والتعليم من أجل دعمها في تقديم خدماتها. أتاحت هذه الشركات المرونة في التنفيذ مع زيادة الكفاءة والتوسع في الخدمات، وفوق كل ذلك أتاحت بناء شبكة من الشراكات حول العالم لتقديم الخدمات المبتكرة، مما يعطي فرصة غير مسبوقة في نقل المعرفة والابتكار. بالتزامن مع هذه الشركات الحكومية، فقد شجعنا الاستثمار في القطاع الخاص للمشاركة في تقديم الخدمات التعليمية والتكامل مع وزارة التربية والتعليم، ويقدم القطاع الخاص حالياً خدمات تعليمية إلى 10% من الطلاب، ونسعى إلى زيادة ذلك مستقبلاً. مع وجود هذه الشركات الحكومية لتحمل عبئاً كبيراً عن وزارة التربية والتعليم، فقد اتجهنا إلى إعادة هيكلة القطاع على مستوى الوزارة وكذلك في الإدارات التعليمية والمدرسة للتركيز على تعلم الطلاب. الحضور الكريم، إن المنافسة تتطلب معرفة القدرات وتحديد مستوى الكفاءة، ولذلك فقد أنشئت مؤخراً هيئة مستقلة لتقويم التعليم العام، تمثل جهازاً متخصصاً يمارس دور التقويم الخارجي لكفاءة النظام التعليمي لكل الجوانب المتعلقة بالطالب والمعلم والمدرسة والمنتجات والخدمات التعليمية، ويبني كذلك منظومة المعايير المتعلقة بالطالب والمعلم والمنهج والمدرسة، بالإضافة إلى منح رخص المعلمين. ويسير مع هذا التقويم الوطني المشاركات في الاختبارات الدولية المتعلقة بالعلوم والرياضيات واللغات لتحديد موقعنا بين دول العالم والاستفادة من تجارب الدول المميزة ومواءمة المناسب من سياساتها وممارساتها. وقد حققنا تقدما ملموسا من عام 2007 إلى 2013، ولكن طموحنا أن نكون ضمن مقدمة الدول في الأعوام القادمة. السيدات والسادة، لعلي أختم حديثي بتساؤل رئيس لا يفتى عن تكراره أصحاب القرار حول العالم: ما طبيعة الابتكار في التعليم الذي يمكن أن يحقق لنا توفير نظام تعليمي يسهم في إعداد الطلاب والطالبات لوظائف لم توجد بعد، وربما باستخدام تقنيات لم يتم اختراعها حتى الآن ليتمكنوا من حل مشكلات لا نعلم أنها أصلاً ستكون مشكلات مستقبلاً، وهذا وفقاً لكارل فيسك. أتمنى أن أكون قد تمكنت في مشاركتكم بعض أعمالنا ومسيرة التطوير إلى الأمام لدعم طلابنا في اكتساب ما يمكنهم من النجاح في مستقبل غير واضح المعالم كما وصفه كارل فيسك، وشكراً جزيلاً.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back John Quelch.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Minister, thank you so much for your excellent comments and many, many new ideas and initiatives that you presented. I'm going to introduce, first of all, the panel members in the order in which they're going to speak. And then we will also, in this session, have hopefully some time for audience questions as well. First, we will hear from Ewan McIntosh, who is second from the end. He's the founder and CEO of a company called NoTosh and has had considerable experience in education, not just as a teacher of German and French, but also working closely with the governments of both Scotland and of the European Union in Brussels. Then secondly, also in the field of K through 12 education, we're going to hear from Dino Varley at the very end, and he's Group Chief Operating Officer and a board member of GEMS Education, and this is the largest privately held K through 12 education company in the world, operating across all continents. A very interesting company, and I think a lot to teach us about how to effectively do K through 12 private education. And then thirdly, we will move on chronologically from K through 12 to youth employment issues with Ron Bruder, who is the founder and chair of Education for Employment, an organization that is particularly dedicated to skills-based training, readying university-level students for employment in the workplace to contribute to economic development. And then finally, Eric Mazur, who is professor of physics at Harvard University, who's always taken a tremendous interest in the issue of educational assessment, and he will then speak from the perspective of someone from higher education. So that's the lineup. I'm going to turn first of all to Ewan. Your thoughts, please, to get us started, Ewan.
Well, first of all, I was delighted that during the morning of the conference, time and time again, by my reckoning, every 15 minutes, people were mentioning or referring to education, learning, as being the powerhouse of competitivity, regardless of which country you're looking at. And when you think about it in those terms, that not only does talent follow money, but money follows talent, it means that education is one of the very few government departments where every penny spent is actually a penny invested. It's being invested and will come back later on. And the second was this need behind innovation for entrepreneurship, and this notion that companies may start small, but they have this ambition to scale, as Daniel Eisenberg put it. And I think that notion of scalability, coupled with the reality of education, presents this really interesting challenge for us, because scalability is really troublesome in education. When you take away all the grand strategy and the 5-year plans that most education policies and schools have, what you're left with is the question of when you're a young person, aged between, 2 years old and 18 years old, what are the biggest influences in your life? What is actually going to shape who and what you become? And the answer is really two key groups. One are your friends and your family, your mum and dad. And the second is school. And school still forms a hugely influential part of young people's lives. No matter how much technology they have around them, school is still the biggest social occasion they have in the week, and it's still the place where they are hugely influenced. And when you come down to that notion of school being the influencer, you also reach the conclusion that actually it's each individual school, each individual teacher, and those parents around each individual child that form the most scalable unit you can get in education. The influences that these individual people, these small groups, schools, parents, individual teachers, those are the units of change. So when we talk about systematic future of education change in very grandiose terms, when we talk about national policy or even district policy, we're still too big, because actually it comes down to the quality of the people that you have in place. And those people are your head teachers, your leaders, and also your classroom teachers. You show me the algorithmic model that doesn't strip away the magic of a wonderful teacher. The second point is that the content of the strategy we do make needs to relate more to what we know makes quality learning. We know largely what makes for great high-quality learning, and we don't see it. And one of the key reasons we don't see it is what Pierre Bourdieu, the French philosopher, puts down as your habitus, your field, and your identity. Identity is important for teachers. Most teachers choose to become teachers because they remember being taught. Think of the last teacher you can remember teaching you. And that's the reason you would go into the teaching profession, because to some degree you want to emulate the way you were taught, which means that even our youngest 20-something teachers are replicating teaching strategies that are at least 10 years out of date, maybe more. And a good example of that would be teachers' attitude towards assessment, or systemic attitudes towards assessment. This would be my final point, I think. Assessment is largely misunderstood. It's misunderstood by the private sector, it's misunderstood by the technology startups, it's misunderstood by most policy makers, and it's even misunderstood by many teachers. Because the most powerful assessment that we can give young people is one that actually we do not confer onto them. It's not a grade, it's not big data or big data, as the mostly North American companies are going crazy about at the moment. It's not these things. It's students being able to take control of their own learning journey, understand for themselves where they have been, where they are now, and where they are going to go next. And to do that, they need to be in charge of their own assessment. And when you've got that, you've really got entrepreneurial learners.
Can I just ask you one thing, picking up on your last point? One of the things that we often see in education is the attempt to create or identify the one-size-fits-all solution. Because it's a publicly provided good in many cases, what I provide for you should not be different from what is provided to me. But actually, we know that different students learn differently and in different ways and with different styles. How can a public education system properly accommodate to these differences in the way in which groups of students actually learn best and want to learn?
Students may feel that they learn best through some ways or other, but students need an even application of everything. They need equality of access to lots of different ways to learn, and they need equality of access to better standards of teaching. And I think at the end of the day, for better learning, primarily schools are still that vehicle of change. So it comes down to, in large part, better teachers who can give more opportunity to students to take control. And even in the best international schools in which we work, you have the same mix of excellent teachers, the big mediocre group in the middle, And yes, you have poor teachers. Even in your $45,000 a year schools, there are poor teachers. Shock horror.
And what makes a better teacher in the 21st century?
A better teacher is a thinking teacher, one who consistently and constantly looks to make those incremental improvements to their teaching. And that means teachers being treated as professionals in the same way as lawyers, doctors are treated as professionals, that they undertake action research, that they look to see how to better their own craft, that teachers take responsibility for it. It's not enough for a government top-down to give standards for teaching, because the teaching profession has to decide what those goals should be for themselves in the same way as any other profession. And when you get that autonomy of professionalism in the teaching profession, you've solved the biggest problem of all, which is how do we increase the general capability of all teachers. And then we can start to look at additionality, so adding technology, adding innovation to the mix.
Okay, Dino, I wonder whether or not you agree from a private sector perspective with what Ewan has said. And in particular, let me just start you off. We want to hear about GEMS and what you do. But what does a better teacher in the 21st century look like at GEMS?
From a GEMS education perspective, I think I agree entirely with what Ewan has stated. I think when you think about all of the things that you can do in education, and frankly, globally, all of us know what the good things to do in education are. But the single most important catalyst is a great teacher. And for me, we always simplify things. We try to keep things simple because, frankly, that's the only way that we believe we can get true systemic change. A teacher is one that exhibits passion. Are they passionate about working with young people and helping them fulfill their potential? Are they people that can facilitate, can be great mentors, great guides, great role models? The idea of the teacher as that subject matter expert is going to become increasingly irrelevant. But the idea of that teacher that, in fact, we're almost going back to the days of Socrates or Aristotle, where you're saying that is actually the model of great teacher that we need for the future. Again, I would agree entirely with what Ewan stated, but for us, that's what I suppose a great teacher looks like.
And carry on with a little bit more about GEMS and why you've been so successful.
Well, I think it's important before perhaps I give you a sense of what GEMS does, and I won't spend too much time. It's important for us to collectively understand the scale of the challenge. Today, if we actually agree collectively that education, and it's been said already today, represents perhaps the single most significant issue that we need to address if we're to solve some of the world's most pressing problems, whether it's conflict, whether it's poverty, and today, and essentially the theme of our forum, if we're to truly build sustainable competitiveness at an individual, a community, and a national scale. So if I can break this down for you, it's interesting to understand. Typically, the education gap is defined as Millennium Development Goal 2, which, and the number today stands at 57 million young people that do not have access even to a basic primary education. And there have been improvements in this number, although we will not meet the target. However, what if we were to propose a definition that wasn't just about access, but access to quality education? So now you start to consider those students that are in classrooms around the world where there isn't a teacher standing in front of them. So absenteeism rates in certain emerging markets run at 55%. So in those cases, administrators are forced to put classes together that number 70 or 80 students. Again, quality is compromised. What if we were to start to look at illiteracy rates globally? And today, those numbers, based on UN statistics, stands at 775 million people that cannot read or write in order to be gainfully employed. Then you start to look at accelerating population growth dynamics around the world. And again, I usually cite this number. If you look at Brazil, Russia, India, and China, you would need to add every year 10,000 schools just to keep pace. So that isn't taking into account the existing capacity shortage in somewhere like India. India is short of 200,000 schools today. So you start to put all of these numbers together, you start to propose a definition that isn't just about access, but access to quality. And the scale of the challenge that lies before us extends to well over 1 billion young people and is accelerating away from us. So given this context, I think His Excellency earlier on in the morning said, we don't have the luxury to be complacent. And I suppose that's one of the silver linings as well. Where there is significant challenge, there is significant opportunity. And today, in everything that we've seen, government sector on their own cannot move quickly enough to fulfill this need. Private sector on their own cannot move quickly enough to fulfill this need. My family's been in education for 55 years. It's taken us 55 years to build a platform that has the privilege of educating 142,000 students across 16 countries, and yet that is nothing, given the numbers that I've talked about. We know that NGOs on their own cannot cater to this challenge. So certainly what we believe from a GEMS perspective is that the only true way to address what we believe is the most significant challenge of the 21st century is through powerful collaborative partnerships between public sector, private sector, and the NGO sector in order to truly find the solutions that we need to desperately find.
Has there been any progress in terms of understanding cognitive learning approaches such that one could scale the delivery of education, meaningful education, through electronic means to vast hundreds of thousands of students? Has anyone done that to the point where they have validated effective learning coming from those initiatives?
I certainly think technology is at a state today where there are enablers, there are delivery platforms. I think the validation of whether it's still effective, are we delivering a better quality or value of education? Can we validate it through the way our students are performing, in the way that our teachers are teaching better? That's still to be proved. The delivery systems are there, but what I would certainly say is that my father gets upset with me because he doesn't necessarily understand technology to the same extent, but the reality is it's still ambiguous. We believe it's still ambiguous. So for us, it's still waiting to see what's out there in order to try and figure out what the next step is to leapfrog.
Okay. Before we move to Ron, can I just underscore, I think I heard this right, but you said that in certain countries, absenteeism of teachers was running at over 50%.
Absolutely.
Would you like to...
India is the example that I cite because it's obviously where my family is originally from, but forget teachers being absent 54% of the time. You have principals, the administrators, the heads of school that may be absent for up to 70% of the time, which is also why you're starting to see innovation, by the way. Today, there are models of incredible education in India, in other parts of Africa, that are running at $3 to $5 a month because the national system isn't able to produce. There is no guarantee that there's going to be a teacher standing in front of that child to actually even deliver the curriculum.
Okay. All right. Food for thought. Ron, talk to us about skills development for meaningful contributions on the part of young people to economies of the world. Obviously, youth unemployment is a huge problem. Even youth who have been through university education in many parts of the world cannot get meaningful employment. What have you discovered in your review of this, and what have you been contributing through your organization?
We have learned our goal as an organization is to enable youth to get the meaningful employment that they feel they're entitled to because they've worked, they've gone to school, in many instances, they've gone to college. And the countries that we operate in, which include Egypt, Jordan, Morocco, Yemen, Gaza, West Bank, Tunisia, the higher education you get, the greater your unemployment probabilities are. I'm going to repeat that because it's kind of astounding, and it was in the beginning when I learned it. College graduates in the countries we operate in have pretty much double the unemployment rate of high school graduates. Now, if you're investing in a stock or in any other entity, you'd call that a negative return on investment. And so we have looked at that and we have studied that. And we've come to the conclusion that it's one of the major drains in moving these economies forward. You have tremendous youth bulge, you have tremendous youth unemployment, and one of the major factors that's causing that is you have kids going and having training fatigue. They study, they study, they study. At the end of the day, though, they do not get a job. And so we've approached it in a somewhat unconventional fashion. Although we're based in the US, we have a presence in Europe, we build local foundations. And each local foundation is charged with figuring out what the needs are and what jobs are really out there. The interesting thing is there are millions of jobs in the region that go unfilled because they do not have the talents that are needed for them. And so we start with a local board, and the local board has skin in the game. They put in money, they put in time, they put in effort, and they go either as employers on their own, or they go to other employers and they go, what do we need to do? How can we change that? And just, there are so many things to cover, and I know we have limited time, so I'll just kind of gloss over things in a hopefully a meaningful fashion. I went to Khalid Toukan 7 years ago. Khalid was the MIT graduate minister of employment for Jordan. And I finally got him out of his office and I said, if we could do just one thing in your country to make a difference, what would that be? And he looked at me and he said, soft skills. At the time, quite frankly, I'm a shopping center developer. I didn't appreciate soft skills. I didn't really have much of a clue. But I went back to my staff and I said, soft skills are obviously important. Let's build the best soft skills program in the world. And we went and we did that with McGraw-Hill. And we went out and teaching these kids soft skills. And that's a program that we built which teaches them resume writing, interviewing, critical thinking, team building, work ethic, what to wear, what to say, public speaking. And what it really does with these kids, which is amazing, it gives them something called self-esteem. With self-esteem, they then have something else called creativity because they're comfortable thinking out of the box. And so that has become a very core competency that we teach throughout. We have a shortened version that we got from Manpower called Finding a Job as a Job. Instead of 3 months, we deliver it to kids in a matter of days. But it goes over the whole curriculum and it gets them out, gets them into the workplace. And so we're training thousands of students. That's helpful, but that doesn't really solve the problem and it doesn't move the needle. We believe that by training thousands and then also helping other institutions, we can change how education is delivered in the region. And that'll be unacceptable. Like we're working with, I won't mention names, we're working with a major university in Morocco. 20 some odd thousand students. We know because their chair is on our board. Their placement rate is 18%. 82% of their graduates do not get jobs. We are now working with them. We're giving them curriculum. We're giving them tools. We're showing them how to work to the labor market, how to gear their courses more effectively, and we hope to get that over 60%. But the bottom line is that will only also move the needle if we can make it something that's systemic. So our goal in all of the countries is to be doing enough training, to be working with enough institutions, both big, large, public and private, as well as with corporations. We have over 1,000 corporate relationships. And that if we can do that, we can create a tipping point, and that education will shift and training that doesn't lead in large part to a job will cease to exist by and large. We do shoot for 85%. We also focus on women. Women are the catalysts of change, I believe, in the region. And we have found women are much less risk adverse. I was at a course in Tunis about 6 months ago in entrepreneurship. And I was shocked to find that 85%, 87% of the enrollees were women. Much more eager, plowing forward with great enthusiasm. And so we have pushed, and now last year, our number of graduates were 53%, and we think that can make a big difference. But the key, and what I want to leave you with, is that there needs to be an improvement, a change in the systems, especially the higher education systems, so that they do focus on the needs of the labor market, and they do track. Because I go around and I ask institutions what their placement rate is, and people don't know. And the first way you can solve a problem is to know what it is and make yourself accountable for higher numbers.
Can you just give us one example, not necessarily naming the country, but of perhaps the 2 or 3 areas where the skills gap is greatest? In other words, the economy of the country needs more people with this skill or that skill or capable of doing. What are the 2 or 3 areas where you would say across the Middle East, North Africa region, you know, those are the areas where the higher education system should reorient its efforts to more training and development?
Good question, but a challenging question. Well, as I mentioned, it's amazing what happens when you teach basic work skills to somebody. I was at a graduation with the Bank of Misr in Cairo, and we had taught kids from a demographic with no WASTA, from a demographic that the bank didn't really want. We were teaching these kids work skills and banking skills. And I went to the graduation. These kids, it was a class of 100, they divided themselves into 4 groups and came up with 4 ideas with PowerPoint presentations professionally done to show the bank how they could make more money. The bank was shocked. Senior vice presidents don't do that. These kids from the street, from the dirt, having gone through the program, came up with ideas. The bank adopted 2 of them and took out half-page ads in the 6 leading newspapers in Cairo to congratulate these kids. It was a game changer for the bank in terms of how they see it. Another example is in Palestine, West Bank. One of our key partners is Sama Khoury. Sama runs Consolidated Contractors. You may know them. They're the largest construction company in the Middle East. Sama has been a very strong supporter. And one of the things that the Palestinians are faced with is everybody wants their child to be an engineer. It's amazing. Everybody has to be an engineer. In the US, everybody has to be a doctor. There, it has to be an engineer. And the reality is, there are not enough jobs for engineers. So one night over dinner, we put our heads together and we brought in some of our Palestinian partners. We said, okay, they're rolling off the assembly line and they're not getting into the labor market. What can we do about it? Well, we couldn't fix the whole problem, but the solution came about 2 months later after we did a lot of research. And we do a lot of research. Some of the best courses that we teach are the courses that we don't teach. Where people come up with brilliant ideas and they look great. At the end of the day, if the dog doesn't hunt, we shoot it. We don't do a course unless we really know that that graduate can get a job. And so here, we looked at it, we scratched our heads, we went to our local board, local employers, and we said, where is there a need? What can we do with some of these engineers? And we built a course there teaching them how to manage construction sites. Went to Colorado State University. We brought instructors from Colorado State. For some reason, they didn't want to go to Palestine, so we shipped everybody over to Jordan. We did a training of trainers, and we were off to the races, and we got a tremendous result and empowered them. In Gaza, I'll give you one more. And in Gaza, we were working with accountants from Islamic University, notably Harvard of that region, excellent university, and they were teaching accountants. But the reality was, the accountants really didn't understand how to solve problems. They knew the rote, they could spit everything back. It was almost like they knew accounting by rote, but they didn't know how to be creative. And so we built at the University of Maryland what we call a mini MBA that forced these kids to solve problems. I remember we shipped the first group of them out of Gaza off to the west, off to the Gulf, and I sat down to learn about how they had succeeded. And they were far better than anybody could have imagined, having taken just a few-month course in how to solve problems. You can make a tremendous difference in the trajectory of these kids' lives by giving them not a huge amount. Our typical course is anywhere between 2 to 4 months, and it changes their lives forever.
Last question before we move to Eric. So is it, in your view, easy or at least feasible to inject into the curricula of universities in the region the kind of courses that you're talking about, or are those universities so fossilized that they can't even achieve the introduction of a problem-solving course in an accounting curriculum? Are they receptive when you show them the results of your work? Are they receptive to embracing this concept, or are they saying, oh, well, that's not for us and we don't really believe in it?
Up until now,
Can higher education in this region really improve?
up until now, I thought you liked me. That's a tough one. The answer is, depending on the university and depending on the time, it's happening more and more. We have gone to universities that wouldn't have looked at us 2-3 years ago, had no receptivity at all, because they knew how to do it. They've been doing it that way for 250 years, and God forbid there should be a change. But some things have changed. One, our model has worked. And more important than our model, because that would be ego, more important than our modeling working, the times have changed. People are using, one of our board members, Wael Fakirani, runs Google for the Middle East. And he said it's a game changer. He and I had dinner 2 nights ago in Dubai. It's a game changer. People are having to be receptive to new modalities. They cannot be as sclerotic as they used to be. I see a tremendous difference. I went to Cairo University 7 years ago and I suggested some changes to them that really could have put them on the map in the field of nursing.
All right. Let's
Change.
segue to Eric in the interest of time. Eric, I think, is going to make his remarks from close to the podium. So, Eric, why don't you give us your perspective from the heights of Harvard Applied Physics Department?
Sure, although I think it will transcend. And if I may,
Okay.
I'd like to start with a little anecdote. About a year ago, I was boarding a flight to Buenos Aires to give a lecture there. And after boarding my flight, sitting down in the airplane, I started chatting to a young lady next to me. It turns out she was working for a cloud-based education company, and I had just started my own cloud-based education company, so I thought I'd better find out what she's doing. It turns out her company was making flashcards, cards that have questions on one side and answers on the other, for smartphones. Now, those of you who know about my work know that I don't place a high value on memorization. So I had trouble not rolling my eyes. I managed not to roll my eyes. But it turns out I just attended a talk by a psychologist at Harvard, a psychologist from Washington University who had come to Harvard to give a talk about memory. His name is Ruddy Roedinger. He has studied memory and retention using flashcards. And in a paper that he published in Science magazine in 2010, he showed that if you study with flashcards, you remember only 35% after 1 week. You remember it, well, for maybe 2 days. After 1 week, only 35% is left. After 2 weeks, you can't even measure it anymore. I thought that it would be good for her to know this. So I grabbed my iPad, I downloaded the article in Science, and I gave her my iPad. She looked at the iPad for no more than 10 seconds and then handed it back to me. And she looked me straight in the eyes and she said, "But we only guarantee that they will pass the test." I'd never thought about it that way, but it brought back lots of memories. My daughter was an undergraduate at Harvard, pre-med, and we talked a lot about education very often and about how to study. On the weekend, she'd come home, and then on Monday mornings, we'd drive back to campus. I'd be sitting in a driver's seat, she'd be sitting in a passenger seat next to me. I'd look over, flashcards.
Got it.
I'd say, "Natalie, what are you using flashcards for?" She says, "Well, I need to know all these amino acids." I said, "I have an app for that." Seriously, I have an app on my iPhone. I'm doing some work in biophysics, so occasionally I need to know the amino acids. And she'd tell me, "Yes, but I cannot use my iPhone during the exam." And that made me realize that the assessment is what really drives student behavior. So much of education is instructors delivering, we heard the word delivering mentioned several times, readily available information and then having the students regurgitate that same information back. I think we all agree that global competitiveness requires innovation and creativity. I think it's fair to say that education doesn't do a really good job teaching innovation and creativity. In fact, I'm being kind here. I think education does a very good job stifling innovation and creativity, and it's often the dropouts that end up changing the order of things. Now, my work in education has shown it's not that hard to reawaken the innate curiosity of the human mind, to train that very important part of our body that is responsible for innovation, creativity, resilience, agility. So I think we need to rethink education, but it's only recently that I started to become aware that, in a sense, assessment is the silent killer of learning. So we must rethink education, but above all, we must rethink how we assess, because if we don't do that, we will continue to educate the followers of yesterday instead of educating the leaders of tomorrow.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I'm going to ask the Minister for some reflections on what you've heard so far. Any ideas there, any nuggets that you think are particularly relevant to the Kingdom?
Education reform is becoming more and more like a science, and most or all of the areas of improvements are common across the countries. And the question is how to do it. We all agree that we need to improve the quality of the teachers. We all agree that we need to improve the quality of the curriculum and the way we teach our kids or the students. I agree that we need to focus more on skills. The focus is increasing more and more as we go to the knowledge society. We need to enable and empower our students with the right skills, with the right tools. The other point that we need to redefine the roles and responsibilities of teachers, schools, and students. We should reform our schools to be student-centric. We need to have the teachers as facilitator, and I agree that the subject matter teachers will be more and more less relevant. We need to enable the students with the right technology. E-learning, I believe it will be more mature in the coming years. So far, we didn't see any mature deployment countrywide, but we believe that it will bring major shortcuts to our country and to most of the countries. We need to introduce adaptability, interactiveness, more of dynamicism to the teaching profession. We need to decrease the gap between students and teachers. We believe that the gap is increasing because of the flood of knowledge and information. We need to decrease it somehow with using the right content, the right technology, the right measures, and the right evaluation. We are all excited, but we believe that it will be like evolution rather than revolution. But it will happen. We are in talk with a number of companies. We are watching a number of countries. We believe that enabling the role of the students and decreasing the role of the teachers will bring major shortcut to the country.
Okay, a couple of questions on the live stream feed. I'll ask you, Minister, directly because they pertain to the Kingdom. One is the role of physical education and what is the Kingdom doing by way of any initiatives in that area. And then secondly, IT. You yourself are a computer scientist by training. And the question from Mohammed Akram is relates to IT finishing school programs, as he describes them in universities, to convert IT graduates into employable workforce members?
Regarding the physical education, we believe in educating and enabling our students to be physically fit. A couple of years ago, we developed a nationwide physical education strategy with the help of some Spanish company. We did some benchmark across 20 countries. We started the implementation. We focused on a number of sports. We started training a number of teachers. We established so far 200 school clubs nationwide for male and females. Our target is to open 1,000 school clubs. They are like community clubs. They open in the evening, during the weekends, for students, teachers, parents, for the community at large. And we believe that physical education is very important, not only for the student joy, but also for the student outcomes. It will make the schools more attractive, more engaging. For the IT question, I think it has to do with the higher education ministry, but I will try to answer it. I think we didn't have an issue with employability with the IT graduates. The market is huge, is increasing, but once you find the high calibers, the IT high calibers, they will get usually a number of job offers. This is for male, but for females, the country trying to find and to expand the horizon for their job opportunities. And we believe that using IT and enabling remote working will introduce more IT jobs for females. There was a piece in Wall Street Journal a month ago. I think Saudi Arabia is one of the top countries that we have female IT graduates more than male IT graduates. And the challenge is now to find good jobs for them.
Okay, thank you, Minister. I think I'm told we're under the gun in terms of time, but we have time for one question from the floor, and I'd like the question to be about K through 12 education, which often gets shortchanged in these discussions. Is there anyone here who has a question, brief question, on K through 12 specifically? Okay, we'll take the gentleman in the yellow shirt here, if you can get a microphone quickly to him. Please keep it brief.
Okay, I agree very much with that assessment is the killer of learning, but I just would like to get your thought of what's the alternative then in order to grade the students and make sure that they have learned
All right,
what they're supposed to.
Excellent question, thank you. Eric, you go ahead first, then we'll have the other two.
In fact, I'd like to echo what Ewan said at the beginning. Assessment should be for learning, not of learning. In other words, we need to make the focus of the assessment the feedback to the learner, not a grading or a punishment or whatever. In fact, let's think about it for a moment. How accurately can we grade people? I know plenty of instances of people who come to Harvard with perfect transcript and end up being very disappointing, and I know plenty of people who end up doing very poorly in school and end up having stellar careers later. So I think our ability to actually judge learning is very, very limited. In fact, it's an illusion. And therefore, we would do much better to focus on the feedback to the learner. In the past few years, I've abandoned exams and grades in my courses and focused on the feedback, on making the assessment, which is continuous, an opportunity for students to know where they stand and where they're heading.
Okay, Ewan and then Dino, and then we're finishing.
Sure. The grade that the gentleman talks about is really serving one person and one person only, and that's the institution of school. The grade does not improve learning. In fact, giving a student a grade and a comment does not improve learning. If you want to improve learning in a child or in an adult, There's one thing and one thing only that will do it: a comment with no grade. And we have lots of schools now that are working with us who have a whole school policy of no grades. And they only provide grades at moments of transition. So a transition would be from primary into middle school, middle into high school, leaving high school. But a child doesn't need a grade to know how well they're doing. In fact, I would encourage you all to go home to your families and ask your children what grade they're going to get. And you will find they are surprisingly accurate. Young people know exactly how good they are, and actually when they talk about it, they report 10% below what they're actually capable of. So when we give them a grade, we're actually helping them to underachieve by about 10%.
Dino.
Look, I think from my perspective, I think we need to understand that there are many vested interests. When we talk about national curricula, when we talk about assessment systems and resources and text, there are great many industries around the world that have built businesses on the back of this. So to some extent, it's ingrained in us. But I would just say that the direction that our world is heading, we're going to learn more about the ability of our young people by the questions that they're going to ask us rather than what they can tell you back. What questions are they going to ask you that truly tells you they've understood that the world that we're going into, frankly, is unknowable? So that's just what I'd leave you with.
Okay, thank you. I'm not going to give the panel a grade, but just a comment. I think you all did a terrific job. Thank you very much indeed, and Minister, thank you for your participation. Thank you. Now listen, I am often hired here as the bearer of bad news. So the bad news I have to give to you is that there is no coffee break. There is no coffee break. We are going straight into the next session on employability and job creation with the Minister of Labour. So please stay where you are, and we'll be right back with you shortly. Thank you.